Welcome to the Reframe Podcast. If you're with us on YouTube or your podcast app, we appreciate you. If you are on YouTube and you like what's happening, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe. You can comment. You can tell us that you don't like us down below. That's okay too. I am here with my friend, Pastor Ed Toole. I appreciate you making time for us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So you are, let's be clear, I work at Perry Hall Family Worship Center. You are a pastor at Perry Hall Family Worship Center.
Correct.
They are the church that solely sponsors this podcast, makes it possible. So I want to bring in some people from the church and kind of get your backstory so people can kind of see who we are and what God's doing here.
Sure.
So I would just like to open it up. I want to start with baby Ed. If you can give me your early life growing up, your family life, and what it was like, and walk us through that.
Yeah, I grew up in Connecticut, in New Haven and West Haven, Connecticut, which to comparisons kind of like Dundalk or Essex, blue-collar towns.
Okay.
And, grew up, my parents are devout Catholics, was Catholic pretty much until my 30s, although not an observant one, if you will, just in my youth, altar boy, the whole thing. But, I never was always making these mistakes. Like, I really enjoyed being an altar boy, but I also enjoyed stealing the altar wine and me and one of the other guys going down behind the church and indulging when we were young. So I was off on my path of enjoying intoxicants at a way too early age.
It started then.
Yeah. So thank you, Catholic Church. No, obviously it wasn't them, but it was something that I struggled with even early in my life, that I liked it, and the culture was different in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, for sure. So, were you and your family close growing up? Okay.
Extremely.
Yeah, siblings or no?
I got one brother and one sister.
Okay.
I always telling my brother he's adopted, but he's not. So
I think that's every brother and sister have to say that.
Yeah, but he's not as close now as we were then,
Sure.
but we're all spread out. My sister's in South Carolina, my brother's still in Connecticut. So,
Okay.
I mean, we keep in contact, but we don't have that regular. I mean, it used to be like every Sunday night, we were the Reagans. We had dinner and then we drank beer and played cards at night and stuff. So,
Yeah, gotcha.
But that's, of course, we're all adults now too. So
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I got a sister in Florida, and I definitely know the difficulty of connecting and staying in touch. And we're both raising young kids too, so it's like we'll call, and then I'm like, sorry, I'm changing the diaper, or I just got thrown up on, so I can't talk right now.
all the fun's of parenthood.
Yeah.
The glory.
When did you? So you grew up Catholic. Did you meet Jesus when you were young? Did you become a believer, or when did that really start to take root in your life?
Yeah, that wasn't until later. I mean, I thought, like a lot of Catholic kids, when I was in 7th grade, I thought I was going to, of all things, go be a priest. And then
Okay.
I realized probably wasn't for me. I mean, I had that spiritual desire, but it just didn't seem right. And then I really didn't do much of anything for many years until I was 33. And when I was 33, I had a girl that started working for me, and she was going to an inner city Pentecostal church. And I was not really interested in that, but I was interested in getting to know her, and one wasn't going to happen without the other. So I had an experience of going into this inner city Pentecostal Apostolic Church, which was about as opposite of a spiritual experience as it can be from a Catholic church.
Yeah.
This was one of those socially conservative, but very, very physical form of worship, and lots of gifts of the Spirit going on in there. So it was intimidating the first 2 times. I thought it was nuts. And then, I went a 3rd time, and God kind of shook me up. And I ended up getting baptized a few days later, came out of the tank, praying in tongues, quit drinking and drugging at that time, and maybe 2 weeks later I quit smoking.
Wow.
So God got a hold of me and shook me up good.
That is wild. It's numbers keep coming up in this podcast, and I'm not a numerologist. I don't put a lot of stock in that, but it's interesting. 33, the age Jesus was when
I never really thought about that till much later. Obviously, our first 33 years were much different, but I always thought that was kind of unique that that God decided to grab me at that point and kind of validated my worth, if you will. That, you always think, especially growing up in Catholicism, there's a lot of guilt and a lot of lack of self-worth in some of the ways they do things. So
I've heard that.
Getting into a culture of acceptance and not fear was kind of refreshing, and I liked it.
Do you think that culture of acceptance made it easier for you to release the drinking and the drugs and all the other things?
I think so. And plus, I was around people that weren't. I mean, I was guilty of doing what I always tell my kids and grandkids not to do. They say, the peer pressure. Well, change your peers. I mean, I'm always telling my daughters and my grandkids that, and yet I didn't. I knew once I got away from people that partied all the time, I probably wouldn't, but I liked hanging out with them.
Yeah.
So, Sunday nights through Friday night, I mean, I was pretty much an all day, every day. I mean, I was functional, but I probably did something intoxicating every day for many, many years.
Wow. And it was just overnight. I love stories like that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it wasn't due to, I always tell people, I talk a lot like at the Helping Up Mission and other places just because of my past. And I always tell them, God doesn't work this way with everybody, but he can. And he did for me. That basically just took it all away.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it wasn't because of anything I did, which rarely is the way anything happens once you understand God, that it's got really very little to do with you, and other than being receptive and obedient. But that's how he did it with me, and I'm kind of glad.
I love that word obedient. It's a big one with me. As pastors, well, a lot of times people, they want a measurement of how their Christian life is going.
Right.
They want to see God's work. They want to know when they're closer to him or further away. And I always think, I don't know how you feel, I think it's all you got is obedience. It's the only measurement.
Yeah.
The results are his, and we can't control any of that. But are you listening?
Yeah, and your obedience will follow your faith. I'm reading a book now by a guy called Napoleon Hill, who wrote these books back in the 20s and 30s that were like self-development books, but he had a Christian theme. And this particular one is called Outwitting the Devil. And he is, at this point in the book that I'm reading, he's interviewing the devil. And the devil is sharing his tricks with Napoleon Hill. Now, they always wondered if this was imagined, if he really did. It's really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because if you read it, the text is so believable. And I mean, all about the devil basically says he'll just take your faith and turn it into fear.
Yeah.
And if you can get away from fear, which usually is what keeps us from obedience, then, he can't fight faith.
Yeah.
So if you can encourage your faith and defeat your fear, he can't have any place in you. And it has really put it very nicely for me, because it's something I've had issues with in the past, just struggling with getting faith in its right place.
That's awesome, man. Have you gone through seasons of missing the old life? If not seasons, just days or moments? Are there times when you're low and you wonder?
Yeah, I think human nature just says once in a while we have to fight the urge. It's one of the reasons I hadn't gotten another motorcycle, is because I really enjoyed it, but I also enjoyed that culture, and I just didn't trust myself. I do in a way that I wouldn't suddenly want to go spend more time with people maybe I shouldn't spend more time with.
Yeah.
Because that's, and that's just in between my ears, because I don't think my spirit would let me, but, every now and then, ride by a bunch of bikers and something and say, man, that is fun.
Yeah. And that's the crazy thing. I think there's this idea that God is like this mean guy who doesn't want you to have fun, and a lot of sinful things are fun.
Right.
Like, there's no other way to say it. They're fun, right?
Right.
But I think like the things that we look at as the rules in the Bible are generally the things that actually give you the better life. We just don't know it at the time. Like when you talk about if one man and one woman wait for each other till marriage, well, you immediately cut out diseases and you cut out unwed pregnancies or unwanted pregnancies. It's just a better plan. Yeah. And then, the do not be drunk with wine, or don't be captured by it. Like, you do dumb things when you drink. Like, people do the worst and the dumbest things, and I think it's just, we're like, oh, God doesn't want fun. No, he wants you to be healthy and happy and live a long life. And just cut out those mistakes that you make when you're doing the quote unquote fun things.
Yeah, and it's how you define fun has to change. We just went through in our Sunday morning Bible studies, we did the book of James, and one of the points James makes is that God's whole purpose is for you to have the most abundant life you could possibly have, but we have to understand it from his point of view, not from our point of view. And the things that we view as challenges or if we don't get it, we think of them as punishments, are really God getting our attention and refining us, which is going to happen right to the last day. But we're always on this plane towards, we'll never get to perfection. We should never expect it, but we should always be in progress. And as we come in progress in our relationship with God, we really start better understanding his goal for us, which isn't, Stepford wives. He wants us to lead an abundant life above and beyond what we can even imagine. But not, that doesn't mean you get the big house, the big cars, all the money in the world, although you may. That's not his goal, is to meet your vision of what's the best life. It's to get you to see his vision of what's the best life. And that was kind of an eye-opener for me, kind of put a lot of things at peace for me.
Yeah, I love that, because I think I get caught up, maybe we all get caught up on these 80, 90, maybe 100 years if you do things right. And and if that's all you see, then like wealth feels like the win, and a comfortable life feels like the win, and all those things. But I always have to remind myself, God's looking at forever. He cares about now. He cares about these moments, but he's way, way more concerned with forever.
Right.
And I think if we can, I don't often get there, but when I can flip my perspective, then I stop focusing on the things I don't have now. And that helps me a ton.
Yeah, that's, I just think that that's probably one of the dangers of the prosperity gospel is not that God doesn't want to prosper us, but that's not like, it's not the vending machine, you put in a prayer, he pours out exactly what you want, and I'm a big believer in preaching and teaching promises and that God will do things, and some people misperceive that as me stepping into the prosperity gospel, but I just honestly believe that all his promises are true, just maybe not the way we think they are. And but it's kind of dangerous if you're you think Peter Popoff is going to send you that magic solution through the mail. I think you're kind of deluding yourself into that.
That name, I have a story that I've never shared before. I was, late teen, early 20s, and I saw his late night thing about the miracle water or whatever it was, and almost like sarcastically, like, I'm gonna order it. I was like, I'm gonna see what happens, because I'm curious. Like, I didn't believe that anything was gonna change, but I'm like, what is this thing he's doing? What actually happens? So I order it, and I don't know what they did is they waited. It was 2 or 3 months later when he was going to be in the area. I was in Florida at the time. He was going to be in Orlando. So it was a big marketing thing. They waited till he was going to be close, and then they send you the little vial of miracle water and the note that says there's a miracle waiting for you if you just show up. It's Orlando, whatever. But the funniest part to me was the vial had actually broken and the water had spilled out in the envelope. So I was like, this thing that I waited months for is like ruined, like whatever that was.
So you had the miracle paper.
Yeah. I guess it was still
that's
there.
more long lasting, I guess.
I mean, it's a difficult conversation, right? Because we just did a series on miracles. We believe they did happen. We believe they do happen. But I'm with you. I don't think it's the vending machine style. I don't. And again, when I look at the miracles of Jesus, I see him. I'm not going to speak for Jesus, but I can imagine there was some frustration where it's like he just wants to tell us who he is, what he has for us, and we're like, yeah, but can you turn water into wine? And he's like, okay, I did that. Now are you listening? Yeah, but can you walk on water? He's like, okay, fine. Like I did that. Now are you listening?
Right.
Whereas we're still hyper focused on, we want the miraculous. We want to see the mystical, crazy things happen. But is it okay if we don't?
Yeah, well, I mean, he didn't stop doing them, but I think he's also a God of order, and he's a God of rules. And every time you see something done in our dispensation, it was because people followed his plan. Yeah, he was just trying to introduce himself when he first came here, so
Yeah.
he had to shake them up. Well,
Yeah.
we know who he is. We've known who he was for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
So he has given us an instruction book. And I think if we do, now sometimes he's a great God. He'll just do things out of the blue for us, and that's amazing. But, more times than not, it's because you were following his plan. You got rid of that. And usually it wasn't that he did anything. It's because you changed. The new you better understands that what was holding you back. That's one reason I read a lot of positive things, because too many times our mind is our enemy. Because we feed it junk all day, and it tries to hold us back. Whereas if we feed ourselves good stuff through the Word and positive readings, you're replacing that. So you're more receptive to know that it's a worthwhile life.
Yeah.
And things will happen, and, don't judge your position by your bank account.
That's a good call.
That's just the American way.
That's a really good call. I wonder too if some of there's the age-old argument of faith versus science. And I don't know about you, I view them as more one and the same. Like God created physics and everything else,
Right.
and brilliant people have discovered things about things that he set in motion before we existed.
Right,
and
absolutely.
why do you think that's still such it's 2019 and it's still this divided line between it's God or it's science? It can't be both. Why do you see that?
I think just because we're a divided, I heard somewhere where somebody was teaching and said you're either on God's side or the devil's side. There is no demilitarized zone. We're just such a divided people. I mean, not even just speaking to the politics of our country, but just in the world in general. So very few times do we want to look at things that they can be, that this can be with that. It's always, no, it's this or it's that. Now, I do believe maybe there was a Big Bang. I don't know. But if it was, it's because that's how God chose to do it. Right. Just like miracles that have happened in my life, that was because that's how he chose to do it. Other times things happen in a more predictable way. So I just think people in general are so divided, and the enemy is so busy that he's getting a firmer grasp on his as we get closer and closer to the end. And, we just see it now. It's just crazy. You can't, you can kill babies, but these others, you can't use certain words. Otherwise, you're a pariah if you say certain things. But yeah, you go kill all the babies you want right up to birth. But that's okay, because that's the way it should be. And the worst is the ones that say that God's okay with it. They'll actually say that. These are just morons.
You've got the reputation for saying what you think here at this church, so I appreciate that.
No, you can't pull punches with that. There's no validation for some of that. So I'll tell them to their face. I'm never one to shy away from expressing myself. I'm respectful of people, but if you do something that's stupid, that's against God, I'm probably going to be direct. I'm big enough to where most people don't challenge me right up.
I'm scared of you, and I'm right here. So, you think that we kind of, our default is to be divided. Like we kind of seek that out. Like we want teams, we want our own groups.
Yeah, and we're also a culture that's kind of gotten away from accountability. People are not accountable for their actions anymore. It's always somebody else's fault. We're not competitive in a positive way. We feel like we need to be rewarded, the participation trophies. So there's no time for people to have a constructive dialogue or try and see somebody else's point. The fact is, most people just listen to respond. They don't listen to learn. They're waiting for you to shut up so that they can say what they think. They never really paid attention to what you said. And, so people are just so self-absorbed nowadays, and that's a clear sign of the enemy. If you're a follower of Christ, you can be proud of who you are, but you can't have pride, but as a follower of the enemy, pride's a good thing. You're better than everybody else. You're this, you're that, you're everything the opposition to what God tells you are. So it's dangerous.
Yeah.
But it's expected.
Pride is crazy in that in a church and in just our church, something I think about often as when I'm leading worship or when you're speaking, like we're physically raised above the room, you know, and there's reasons for that. So it's for visibility. It's so people can see, they can hear. But I think my thought is, and a lot of churches have changed the vernacular. They call it a platform, which I like that. I see why they don't call it a stage, but it's a stage. Yeah. And at the end of the day, anytime you're on a stage, the possibility of pride creeping in is just exponentially larger. Right. And it doesn't matter if you're leading communion or leading worship, like, it's just you're already in a physical place where, you know, why wouldn't it creep in? And so what do you, like, I guess for me as pastor to pastor, give me some tips, some tricks. What are some things you do to keep yourself level, to remind yourself?
Well, when I get up there, I still view it, and it's probably from my past, as an altar. So I make sure whenever I'm up there that I'm showing proper reverence. I'm in the house of God. I'm literally at the front door to his kingdom in my mind. So I'm gonna treat it like that. And the other thing is, I'm just really careful. Like, one of my people that don't know me, I joke a lot about that. Like, I'll say, well, we could all teach that, but mine's going to be better. Well, but I don't mean it. You know, I just like to play around like that. But I think that we just have to, it's just got to be in your awareness. I mean, it's just a change that takes place where you don't really have to battle it after a while. I mean, it's hard. I mean, you're an accomplished musician, you know, you tour, you have fans. You know, it would be easy for pride to sneak in. So you just got to make it, you know, I think once we realize that it really had as little to do with us and more to do with him, that, you know, I mean, if I, that's what I love about our pastor. You know, even when he brings a good word out on Sunday, I'll give him a thumbs up, and he just kind of shakes his head. Yeah. You know, I mean, he's not going to take a compliment like that. And it's not because he didn't think it was good, but he tries to be as humble as a man could be. He doesn't buy into it. And that's the other thing, I think, as a minister, you got to be careful, because you might preach a great sermon and people coming up telling you how wonderful you are, and you know, no, it wasn't me. Same thing with, you know, I mean, our worship here has evolved most recently, and you know, it'd be easy for a person to say, well, you know, it's me. And it's not, just because God has his vessels. We happen to be blessed to be the vessel for this time, and he could just as easily pull it away. Yeah. You know, and then you know, not only aren't you useful to God, but now you have nothing to boast about. I mean, how many times have we fallen in the wrong direction and God just takes that out of your life? I mean, there was times I focused too much on money, and I was doing very well. And so you want to get my attention. So due to circumstances, I went from very well-to-do to broke, you know, got the focus back.
Yeah. It's funny, like, I like your terminology. I've never quite heard that, and it's strange that I haven't, but altar, that's the right word. Stages maybe not right. I don't think platform quite does it. Altar's a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, it's just because it's, we should be up there not as a performer. I mean, that's one of the things we pray every Sunday is we don't want the people to come to church on Sunday. We want them to love worship, but we want them to understand it is worship. It's not a sing-along. This isn't Mitch Miller with a little bouncing ball for those old enough to remember.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and, you know, and it's not, you're not there to be entertained. You're there to participate. Now, I can't sing. I never pretend to sing, but I do sing, and I sing loud. You know, that's why they sit me all the way in the back, so I don't offend as many people. But
they sit you sit you, you sit back there.
But they, you know, I mean, it's just got to be. I understand. I'm not singing for the people in the congregation. I'm singing to the one who formed me and everything else. And it may not sound good to me or to others, but I know it sounds great to him, you know, because it's coming from my heart. And I think that's one of the evolutions every church has got to make, that you get, especially when we're blessed with such an amazing worship team here, that it's pretty hard to not get caught up in that if you don't have the foundation, you know. And, I mean, I came from churches being inner city Pentecost where it might just be an organ, you know, and a choir of, you know, some church ladies, but man, they would get into worship, and it would go, and it would go, and it would go, and you weren't feeling like, oh, well, they just shut up. I mean, you just got in the flow, you know, and I think too many times, and we're a very disciplined church here, but I think you can accomplish a lot even through disciplining your time.
Yeah,
if you just make best use of it, not just look at, okay, is he done with that yet so we can get on to the next thing? Nah, wrong attitude.
Yeah, and I think I like that Pastor Dom has created the service the way he has with newcomers in mind. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the way to do it. Like it's a weird thing as believers and people, let's just call it whatever you want, seasoned believers, longtime Christians, whatever. I think one of the main challenges for us in the church culture is we need to grow to the point that it's really super not about us. Mm-hmm. You know, you hear people say, like, I wasn't getting fed there, or I didn't like the worship there. Right. And sometimes that is the case, but then sometimes, probably most of the time, like, what did you go there for? What were you expecting? Why were you so you-focused?
Right.
Like, we just did a service where we took most of the instruments away. Right. And it's intentional, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, how do we react when things are different or uncomfortable?
Right. And I think we've addressed that, and then it's really incumbent on the person, because here we have the Sunday morning Bible studies. We have the Wednesday night services or meetings. We have Tuesday morning Bible studies. So if you're not getting fed, it's because you choose not to participate. You want to say, I work. You can't come an hour early for adult Bible study on Sunday, or, I can't get out during the day. Wednesday nights are available, and we hold them at a reasonable hour. I mean, I used to go to church where I went, I live here in Perry Hall. I went to church in Gaithersburg. And midweek service started at 8. We didn't get out till 10, and then I drive an hour and something back home. It was slightly inconvenient. There's no inconvenience here. I mean, it's 7 o'clock. We're very disciplined with our time. We fill the time because we're disciplined, so there's not a lot of fluff.
Right,
and, I think that people that say they come here and didn't get fed, they're going to say that everywhere they go.
Yeah, I think so too. And then it's also, I was just talking with Pastor Don this morning, like the whole didn't get fed thing. Like, what are you doing with your time when you leave? Like, what are you doing at home? Like, the Bible has never been more available in the history of mankind since it's existed. It's never been easier to Google on your phone or, YouTube Bible studies and commentaries and whatever you're looking for. And so I think that's a factor too, is people, hopefully you come here and you meet Jesus, or you're drawn to some part of him, and that lights a fire. That's what Sunday is to me. Like, how do we get people on board? And then, okay, like, I want to, like, when you put everything down, put the drink down, the drugs down, we want to create space for those moments to happen for people. Yeah. And then from there, it's nonstop. Like, they have to work on it, and we have to be their church and be their pastors.
And you got to fill it, because Scripture talks about, you clean the spot, but you don't put something in there, then they're going to come back and there's going to be more of them. So once you've actually cleaned your act up, you got to fill that spot with something. And if you don't fill it with something good, you're going to refill it with something bad. And too many people, even with the church, men's group has been going through this series with Pastor Chan. But a couple of weeks ago, I was blessed to be able to make it. And he said kind of this really thing that just really has stuck with me since. But it's like, he says, if you went to a football game and the team went out there, they clap, they're all excited, they get into the huddle, they break the huddle, and they come back to the bench. And then, okay, that's weird. But they run back out on the field. They do the exact same thing. They get all excited, they call the play, they break the huddle, they run back to the bench. Right? And he's like, that's weird. But he said, well, that's church. Yeah. Every Sunday we get to play. Every Sunday we get a call to action. Every Sunday we should be excited. And then do we put it into action during the week? Or do we just go back to the bench and come back and get to play again next week? And that just was a very visual thing for me. Yeah. And I just thought, wow, that was something cool to have downloaded from him.
That is really cool. And I love that. And it's the perfect place and thought to leave this episode on. Thank you again.
Okay, my pleasure.
If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to like, subscribe, leave comments. You can tell us we look funny. We're okay with that. And thank you to Perry Hall Family Worship Center for sponsoring and making this podcast possible. Thank you, Pastor Ed Toole, for being here.
My pleasure. Okay.